It is a sunny and hot day in Naples. A man is standing at the counter of a bar and he's stirring his espresso. And the man is smiling because things are just going great for him. He's also without bodyguards today. There's also no backup waiting outside the bar because he doesn't need them anymore. He had the only man left who could have posed a threat to him eliminated weeks ago. And now he's untouchable. The man takes his coffee and he steps out onto the street. And he closes his eyes and he lifts his face toward the sun and breathes in the thick, hot summer air. He's listening to the murmur of passing conversations and the buzz of a Vespa speeding by somewhere. And the sharp and steady click of high heels, drawing closer and closer. And then a single gunshot. The man opens his eyes and he looks down and he sees his own blood dripping onto the pavement. My name is Holly and I would like to welcome you to a new episode of my podcast, The True Crime Cocktail Hour. This is the fourth and final case in our little video series, Deadly Women. So you sit back and relax, I'll get everything ready, and then we get started with case 4, Deadly Women, the bloody revenge of mob wife, Assunta Maresca. Assunta Maresca was born in 1935 south of Naples, a city so riddled with corruption and that is so infiltrated with the mafia. A priest had once attempted to perform an exorcism of the entire town via helicopter. So that happened, and Assunta Maresca was born in such a mafia family. Assunta's father, Alberto Maresca, was a mafia boss. Her grandfather was a mafia boss, and her 4 brothers were well on their way to follow right into those footsteps. The Marescas were part of the Camorra, one of the oldest and most dangerous mafia organizations in Italy. So unlike the more famous Cosa Nostra of Sicily, the Camorra isn't run like a strict hierarchy, so there is no single Don at the top. Instead, it is made up of a lot of small single-family clans. And every clan has kind of like their own field of competence. That could be groceries, that could be contraband cigarettes, that could be cocaine. Sometimes they would form alliances with each other, and sometimes they were at war with each other, fighting over control in and around Naples. And control they do. And their influence really reaches into everything from groceries all the way over to cigarettes. And everybody just kind of lives with it. You know, it's almost like a normal thing to do. It is said that approximately 20 cents of every euro goes into the Camorra's pockets. You want to open up a restaurant? Yeah, of course, be my guest. But you'll be hiring my people. You want to open up a clothing store? Sure, no problem. But you'll be selling my products. You want to open up a laundromat? Absolutely. But you must pay me protection money. Or else, maybe someday, under mysterious circumstances, your store, your business, will just go up in flames. So you must pay me to protect you from me. That's how things go down in Naples and with the Camorra. And so it is estimated that they make over 160 billion lire every year. So it is said that Assunta Maresca really early on understood the game. She knew instinctively when it was time to show dominance and when it was smarter to play the "oh, look at me, I'm such a fragile, weak little woman" card. You know, Assunta is kind of like a Barbie within the mafia, she really is, and her life is pretty much a study in contrasts. She learns how to shoot a rifle, then wins a beauty pageant. Then she beats up a girl at school, the daughter of a rival family clan member. So there's that. And by all accounts, it is said that she has this very wild and untamable character. She's also very petite, she is very pretty, she's very spoiled, and all of these qualities ultimately earned her the nickname La Pupetta, the doll. Assunta wasn't really involved into these criminal activities of her family. She was actually a singer and actress. Let's take a look.
Pupetta, cantaci la tua canzone.
E quando femmina te vonne, ma riga sempre no, tu si domie, e cambia solamente per stu suonne.
And of course, her good looks don't go unnoticed. Many men admired her, but Assunta Maresca only had eyes for one man. And that man was Pasquale Simonetti. So Assunta Maresca and Pasquale Simonetti met at this very beauty pageant that crowned her Miss Rione Sanita. Simonetti, as a matter of fact, was just released from prison where he served time for attempted murder. Now, Simonetti is also one of these mafia bosses of the Camorra, and he's very tall and broad-shouldered, and he can be very intimidating if he has to. But he also has a lot of charisma, and he's got something that most of these mobsters don't. He's got the sympathy of the people, and many consider him to be a very welcomed alternative to the very paralyzed justice system in Italy at the time. So every time someone had like a legal problem or was having trouble with somebody, instead of turning to the police and the justice system, they turned to Pasquale Simonetti. Like, there's this very famous story of this young lady who one day showed up at Simonetti's, and she told him that her boyfriend had left her when he learned that she was pregnant. So Simonetti had his man track this man down. So when they did, Simonetti just walked up to this man and asked him in a very calm but firm voice whether he would prefer to spend 10,000 lire on flowers for his wedding or his funeral. Now, I don't have to mention that this man picked the wedding. So that's just the kind of man that Pasquale Simonetti was. So in the 1940s, early 1950s, Simonetti and his clan had control over the entire fruit and vegetable market in Naples. You want to be a farmer and sell your products here? Yes, obviously. But Simonetti sets the price, or your farm will go up in flames, yada, yada, yada. That was the deal, and it made Simonetti rich. Rumor has it that he was pulling in 3 to 4 million lire a day. However, he was not the only major player in the vegetable and fruit market. There were actually two others. One of these men was Antonio Esposito, and the other one was Alfredo Maisto, both mafia bosses in their own right. But Simonetti managed to prevail. He took the lead in the fruit and vegetable market, at least until he had to go to prison. And this is when Antonio Esposito took over the market. But Esposito and Simonetti had formed an alliance shortly beforehand. And so Esposito was like, you don't worry one bit. I will safeguard and set aside a small percentage of my profit and return it once you get out. So Simonetti gets out of prison and he meets Assunta Maresca at this beauty pageant, and the two of them get married on April the 27th, 1955, in this lavish ceremony and this big wedding with over 500 guests. You know, typical mafia-style wedding. These two just looked perfect together. Assunta didn't really have a bridesmaid or a maid of honor. She had a best man, and this best man was Antonio Esposito, the man her new husband had just formed an alliance with. But you know, as everyone in the Camorra knows, allies are only temporary. I mean, shocker, Esposito did not keep his promise. He did not safeguard the percentage of his profits for Simonetti. It was never really his intention to pay him out. But Simonetti wasn't also exactly on the innocent side of the story, you know? He, in return, had absolutely no intention to let Esposito just take over the market and be the boss of the grocery and vegetable market. He wanted to rise to power again and take back what was his, especially now that he had a wife and a baby on the way. Yes, Assunta was pregnant. So on July the 16th, 1955, Simonetti just went down to an open-air farmers market in the city center of Naples. Now, to most of the people there, it was just a normal day, you know, strolling around the farmers market. For Simonetti, it was a very calculated move. He wasn't just there for nothing, he was there for a reason. His goal was to let everybody know that he is still there. He wanted to be seen, and to him that was his first step in regaining his power. So Simonetti was just strolling down the market, he was talking to farmers, he was peeling an orange, when suddenly a young man stepped out of the crowd and looked directly at Simonetti. And Simonetti recognized this man. It was one of Esposito's hired guns. Now, before Simonetti can even react, this young man pulls out a gun and fires multiple shots at Simonetti before vanishing into the crowd. Pascal Simonetti collapses onto the cobblestones, and then it's just pure chaos from then on. So Pascal Simonetti was rushed to a hospital, but he was in critical condition. Things didn't really look good. And when Assunta heard the news that her husband had been shot, she rushed to his bedside, and it is exactly there where Simonetti whispered his last words before he died in her arms. The name of his murderer, Big Tony. Assunta was devastated over the loss of her new husband. And there she was, and she didn't really know what to do. She was 20 years old, she was pregnant, and she was newly widowed. So she's just sitting there, slumped in a hospital chair, crying and weeping, just watching the hospital staff take away her husband's dead body, when suddenly her eyes fell on the nightstand. There, lying cold and heavy in the fluorescent light, was her husband's pistol. Grief turned into anger, and Antonio Esposito's fate was sealed in that very moment. You know, to be fair, she first thought about taking care of Esposito in the legal way, so she showed up at a police station, but she felt like that no one was really interested in finding his murderer. Quite the opposite. It seemed like they were quite relieved that Simonetti was gone in a way. And so Assunta really quickly learned that if she wanted revenge, she would have to get it herself. So on the 4th of August, 1955, Assunta grabbed her younger brother, Ciro, and together they drove to the city of Naples, because there were rumors going around that Esposito was hiding there somewhere. So Assunta, in typical mafia fashion, dressed to the nine, in her high heels, was walking the streets of Naples trying to find Esposito. Hidden in her handbag, her husband's gun, a .38 caliber Smith & Wesson. So as she was walking the streets of Naples trying to find Esposito, she always had her hand in her handbag, tightly grabbing the grip with her finger resting on the trigger. And then suddenly, there he was, coming out of this bar with this stupid, confident smirk on his face, and she just wanted to wipe it away. So Assunta walked up to him in her high heels, and he was just standing there looking like he had to fear nothing. And she pulled out the gun, pointed it towards Esposito, and fired. So even though Assunta, pretty much for the rest of her life, claimed that she acted alone, police ended up finding 29 shell casings right next to Esposito. So much for that. Some sources also say that she just fired 4 times. However, Antonio Esposito was dead. Her husband Simonetti was revenged. And mind you, she was 6 months pregnant at the time of the murder. So she had a baby on the way. So she went into hiding. But just 2 months later, police was able to track her down. She was arrested and charged with murder. As a matter of fact, she gave birth to her son in jail while awaiting trial, and she named her son after his father, Pasquale. Assunta ended up spending 4 years in jail awaiting trial. And when her trial finally began in April 1959, Assunta Maresca was a celebrity in Italy. Everyone knew her name. Everyone had heard and was obsessed with the story about the pretty 20-year-old mob wife who revenged her murdered husband. And the press was just obsessed with her. They couldn't get enough of the pregnant, young, pretty murderess who looked a little bit like Sophia Loren and acted like this tragic heroine coming right out of the opera. The press crowned her the diva of crime. Every day, this prison facility where she was awaiting trial received hundreds of love letters and marriage proposals from men. It looked like the scene from Harry Potter. There was even a musician who wrote a song about her called, I don't know if I'm saying that right, La Legge d'Onore. Anyway, means the law of honor. So during the trial, when it was finally time for Assunta to speak and make a statement, she said, "I killed for love, and I would do it again in a heartbeat." And baby, the courtroom erupted. People cheered, people clapped, and the judges had just really hard time to restore order. But despite public support, the court found her guilty for murder, and she was sentenced to 18 years in prison, later reduced to 13 years and 4 months. But in true mafia fashion, she was suspiciously pardoned 5 years later, and this is when her career as a mafia boss really took off. She was no longer just a mob wife. She was one of the Camorra's first female mafia bosses. This time, instead of singing and acting, she was really involved in some criminal activities, to say the least. She also found another boy toy, also a mafia boss, with the name Umberto Amaturo, and he was like the cocaine king of the Camorra. Really dangerous man. He was really something. But now, deep in the Camorra, really involved in these criminal activities, tragedy was never far. One day, her son, Pasquale, was only 18 years old. He was abducted and murdered, and his body has never been found. But there was a suspect, and that was her own boyfriend, Umberto Amaturo, because the two of them never really got along. Now, Umberto was actually charged with the murder, but there was no proof, and he was ultimately acquitted due to a lack of evidence. Now, everybody was kind of surprised to see that Assunta let him live. And she was even later asked about this. I mean, what's going on? And Assunta, really unhinged, was like, "Well, I didn't have any proof, now did I? Otherwise, I would have killed this man in a heartbeat." Then, in 1982, Assunta Maresca was again charged with murder together with her boyfriend, Umberto Amaturo. Several weeks earlier, police had found the severed head of a forensic scientist in an abandoned car. So allegedly, this guy was actually working for the Camorra, but then also worked together with law enforcement, which is obviously something the mafia doesn't like so much. But there was not really a lot of proof, and Assunta and Umberto were again acquitted for lack of evidence, until, in a very unexpected twist, Umberto Amaturo confessed to the murder, and Assunta Maresca ended up spending 4 years in prison. So after her final prison sentence, Assunta Maresca, the godmother of the Camorra, the diva of crime, La Pupetta, lived a very quiet life in her apartment in Sorrento. And on December the 29th, 2021, Assunta Maresca died at the age of 86 from complications from COVID-19. So that, my dear children, was the story of Assunta Maresca, La Pupetta, the woman, the mob wife, who avenged her husband and became a criminal icon in her own right. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please subscribe to this channel. Give this video a thumbs up. It's always a nice thing to see. You can also leave a comment. I read every single one. And I hope that we will see each other again in 2 weeks for another cocktail and, of course, another true crime case. And for the next case, we'll be heading to East Africa. And we will be talking about a funeral that took a very unexpected turn. Until then, have a lovely weekend. Try to relax a little bit. Kiss. Mwah. And I'll see you then.